Good day. It's the Deeper Dive. Dave Loughran and Adam Shaw. Talking a 7-game basketball slate. Looking forward to it, Adam. How you feeling, man? How was that hangover this morning?
Wasn't too bad. Once I was done the morning show, I felt fine.
Good. Oh, the morning show. That could not have been easy.
No, it was kind of rough.
All right. Well, now that we're back in the I think we banged out a pretty solid early bird podcast, though, I must say.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Pretty good. Anyway, welcome to everybody. Glad to have you with us. To all of our deep divers. We've got 7 games to talk about. Certainly some interesting ones, a bunch of high-priced players, and some value that we're gonna scour up from the bottom. So let's get it popping here. We've got to start this one off. Oklahoma City and Detroit. Looking at this one now, Thunder are 2.5-point favorites. You got a 218 total, and I think this is something you pointed out on the podcast this morning, but it bears repeating. Detroit might not be the best team in the league. but they're quietly playing really solid defense. They have a top 8 defensive rating. Oklahoma ranks number 1 in defensive rating this year. And you've also got the Pistons playing at a bottom 10 pace. So I still think this game will feature some scoring. There are still some players in this game that I like quite a bit, but it does bear repeating that Detroit's defense is no slouch, and obviously Oklahoma City's defense has been playing phenomenally all season long.
Yeah, exactly. Just not the most appealing game here. Obviously, there's good players in it with, Westbrook and Griffin and Drummond, Paul George, but it's just not the most appealing game. Both these teams are strong defensively or strong enough defensively. And the price tags on everyone are pretty reasonable as well. So out of all the games on the slate, I think from a DFS standpoint, this is one of the least appealing.
I am with you here. I am absolutely with you. Now, I will say Paul George is 8,500 on DraftKings and he's 8,600 on FanDuel. And since Westbrook's return, I feel like he's been a forgotten man, but probably not for good reason, because you're still looking at a 29% usage rate. You're still talking about somebody that is averaging 34 minutes per game since Westbrook returned, and 2 of those games he played a total of 5 minutes in the fourth quarter. So this guy's playing 38, 40 minutes in competitive games, and I expect this one to stay close. So George has look, Westbrook is the clear number 1, right? He's the clear lead man in OKC. But Paul George is the clear number 2.
Yeah, I agree. On DraftKings, it's still just tough for me to get to George. I ran 150 lineup crunch right before the show with my projections as of right now, just to kind of have an idea of how roster construction is shaping up. And he showed up in exactly one of those 150 lineups. So
nice.
Just still really tough to prioritize him there. Probably a little bit easier on FanDuel because he's 8,600 there, which is obviously very similar to his DraftKings price tag, but you have to roster the 2 small forwards. So I think probably a little bit easier to get to him since you're not exactly comparing him to every player at every position like you are on DraftKings because of multi-position eligibility. Yeah, so he's fine. I just still kind of doubt that I get that much of him.
Let me explain where I'm at in terms of Paul George. I'd rather play him in terms of the pricier guys. I'd rather play him over Kevin Durant at almost 11,000 on DraftKings. Now, again, this isn't saying he's a top option of mine, but I think it'll all come into vision here in a second. I'd rather play him over Kevin Durant. I'd rather play him over Kawhi Leonard now that we know Kyle Lowry is active. Into focus, by the way, is what I meant to say. I'd rather play him over Tobias Harris, who's only a few $100s less than him. So in terms of crunching lineups, how much do you get? You're right. Probably not going to get a ton, but I like him more than all of those guys based on salaries and projected fantasy points. That's where I'm at on Paul George.
Yeah, and I agree with you, and that's why I think he probably is a better play on FanDuel, because on DraftKings you have to get into the conversation of do you like him more than Drew Holiday? Do you like him more than Towns or guys like that, Curry? So just because of how it's basically positionless on DraftKings. So I think just probably a pretty big difference between the 2 sites.
I think so too. And it's hard to prioritize Russell Westbrook when there's someone like Anthony Davis on this slate. I mean, is this an OKC team that you have much interest in?
No, not at all. I mean, obviously I'm not going to sit here and say Westbrook doesn't have upside because he does.
Of course not.
Right. But I mean, I prefer Davis by a pretty wide margin.
I prefer Davis by a pretty wide margin over all of these top shelf guys. Just spoiler alert here. That's where I'm at. I haven't changed since we did the show last night. I feel the exact same way. Actually, it probably reinforced how I feel about Anthony Davis, so long as he doesn't leave halfway through this game on the second of a back-to-back with his brittle bones. Detroit side of the ball. We talked about this at length on the podcast. Essentially, Blake Griffin, his price has come down. We know that Drummond's going to be locking horns with Steven Adams all day. Not the best fantasy spot, but that should be a fun matchup to watch if you just enjoy basketball. I mentioned that I could see Paul George guarding Blake Griffin because Jeremy Grant, just in terms of the size, I think could struggle there. Blake Griffin is posting up more than any player not named LaMarcus Aldridge, Karl Anthony Towns, and Joel Embiid this year. So even if you put George on him, I still think that Blake has the size advantage over both of these guys in terms of just being bigger than them. But I also think that OKC could make life tough for him. The thing is, he's priced pretty affordably across the board. So I am willing to overlook matchup to some extent just because I think Blake Griffin's price is real friendly here. What are you doing with the Detroit side of the ball?
Not a whole lot. I'm with you on Blake that he obviously can be fine in the spot, but he's just tough for me to prioritize. In the initial crunch I did, I ended up getting 8% of Blake, which is more than I got of Drummond on DraftKings. I don't think I have a single Drummond lineup out of those 150. So I like the spot a little bit better for Blake. I like the price tag a little bit more, but still, it's just going to be tough for me to really prioritize him.
Anything else in Detroit? Because that's pretty much as far as I'm willing to go here.
Yeah, no, I have nothing unless I have nothing.
All right. Dave in Slack chat said Blake's fantasy points have been disgusting lately. He hasn't really smashed minus a few games early in the season. Yeah, well, I wouldn't say they've been disgusting. I mean, 60, 48, 57, 44, 36, 41, 41, 41. No, he hasn't been putting up consistently huge games, but I'm also not ignoring the games where he's taking 20 plus shots. He's still rebounding. He's had a few games where he hasn't, but again, I'm not prioritizing Blake, but I also think there's still a ceiling game. There's still upside here at 8,800 and 9,200. I don't think he's overpriced, and that's really all it comes down to for me. All right, Brooklyn and Cleveland. Let's talk about this one, Adam. We've got the Nets 6-point favorites. Imagine that. The Brooklyn Nets are 6-point favorites in any game against any team in 2018, but that is the case. 210.5 total here at Brooklyn inside the Barclays Center. And I want to start actually with the centers in this game. Tristan Thompson has definitely shot onto the scene recently, at least from a fantasy standpoint. You're talking about a guy that has the 6th most rebounds in the league over the last month, 2nd most rebound chances in the entire league over the last month behind only Drummond. And his usage rate has jumped from 14% to 19%, true shooting from 49 to 56. So while his usage isn't very high, he's still seeing improvement there and in shooting. And obviously he's rebounding like a monster. What do you make of this matchup for TT against a Brooklyn defense that has certainly coughed up a lot of big games to opposing centers?
I love him. And on top of everything that you mentioned about his usage increasing and all of the rebounding opportunities he's gotten, he's just playing monster minutes here as well. He played about 40 minutes in the last game. We've seen him consistently playing around 38 in competitive games. Ante Zizic being out certainly doesn't hurt Thompson's minutes either. And Brooklyn, it's pretty impressive how bad they have been at rebounding this season. One of the slower paced teams in the league, but still one of the worst teams in terms of allowing rebounds per game, on a per game basis, not factoring in pace at all. So as far as efficiency on the glass goes, it's pretty incredible how bad they've been. Thompson, obviously that's where a lot of his production comes from. And, we talked about it on the podcast, but Jarrett Allen's ability as a defender and his length doesn't concern me in this particular spot because so much of Thompson's offense comes on, from offensive rebounds and putbacks. It doesn't come from him, getting the ball in the post and having to score on Jarrett Allen, defensively. So I just think it's a really, really good spot for Thompson. I really like the price tag, especially on FanDuel. He's only 6,700 over there and really all season long, but today included. Their center pricing is just, it's tighter than DraftKings is. And so you're really getting a discount on Thompson relative to other guys at the position.
Agreed. It's hard not to like Thompson. Now, the one thing that comes into play for me that is pretty beneficial on a site like DraftKings is Enes Kanter's also in a really good spot. Even somebody like John Collins at 5,300 is very affordable. And as a per minute guy, I think that's pretty nice as well. You can play 2 of those centers on DraftKings, whereas on FanDuel, you can only play 1 of them. And in terms of prioritizing, it does make it a little bit more difficult. I guess on FanDuel, though, you are getting a $700 discount on Thompson from Kanter.
Yeah, exactly. And you mentioned Collins on DraftKings. Like his price there is just really, obviously we'll talk about him, but his price there is just way too cheap.
Yeah.
Cantor in the same price range as well. On FanDuel, you have Thompson kind of just sitting there by himself with no one around him that's even close to as appealing.
Yep, that's exactly the case. Look, there are a few centers I really like today, and we'll get to all of them. I'm assuming you're on them as well. I don't know. We haven't talked since last night, but Thompson's one of them. And Thompson's the type of guy that I generally don't like playing, but his price is fair. In competitive games, he's playing upwards of 40 minutes, 39, 40, 40 again over his last 5 games. You're getting a lot of run, a lot of burn from Thompson, which mitigates the fact that maybe he doesn't shoot a ton on a per 36 clip, but that doesn't really matter. So that helps him quite a bit. Now, what about the rest of this game? You have Tristan Thompson, and then then everything gets cloudy. Like, yes, Jared Allen's on the other side. His price point has come down. I have enough respect for Thompson to where I'm not prioritizing Allen here, but I don't think he's terrible. And then really the rest of this game, we've talked about this so often. There's just so many wings and so many swingmen that Kenny Atkinson can deploy at any point. It's really tough.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to talk about ceiling, obviously D'Angelo Russell's capable of going out there and having a monster game at a mid to upper $7,000 price tag. So the ceiling's there, but in terms of projecting him, he just doesn't really come out as a great play. I mean, this is a game that I don't expect to be very fast paced. You're losing some possessions there, and it's obviously just a slate with a lot of good plays on it. So nothing else in this game outside of Thompson that I plan on prioritizing.
Me neither. I mean, is there anything else you want to discuss in this game before we move on?
So we're still waiting on Joe Harris news. He's questionable for Brooklyn. If he's out, then I would expect that you get around 26 minutes from DeMarre Carroll, which would make him fine as a punt play, especially on FanDuel. I expect we would get Dinwiddie starting again. I expect that we would get around 24 minutes out of Shabazz Napier as well. So a little bit of stuff opens up if Harris is out. If he's in, then I think that, it's just kind of status quo with Brooklyn, and it's basically Russell or nobody for me from the Brooklyn side.
Yeah, Russell's the only other one for me. I think Russell's a perfectly fine play. But again, there are some other guards. You have to prioritize in spots. And I don't think Russell's a bad play, but I also am not in love with the fact that even though he saw a stretch of games where Atkinson upped his minutes, you really like there. Okay. Let me put it to you this way, Adam, see what you think. Of all of the players that are in that mid to high 7K price range, Russell's really the only one where you're saying each day that, you know what, anything could happen where he plays 26 minutes instead of 33.
Right. And so just kind of, I'm looking through my crunch on DraftKings right now, and I have Russell projected for 34 minutes just to, try and get his upside in there in tournaments. And I ended up getting 18%. I ended up getting 10% of Dinwiddie, like 10% of Alan Crabb because he's cheap. But, clearly nobody that's really like jumping off for me, but Russell, is my favorite guy there.
Right. And you know what? Russell does have the upside. There's no question. It's just he also has the downside. So that's something you need to know going into it. All right, we'll move on here. But before we do, if you have yet to check out awesemo.com, you can do so by using the promo code Deeper Dive, all one word. Promo code Deeper Dive, all one word. You head over to awesemo.com, AWESEMO, and click the Join Now button, or click Join Now on the homepage. Pick out your plan, and after you do that, when you're checking out, you'll be prompted to enter a code. It's Deeper Dive. And there you go. Deeper Dive. You get a free week, everything behind paywall for an entire week. You can check it out free of charge and see if you like it. I think you will. All right, let's keep going. Denver and Toronto. Here's another one where fun game to watch. I don't necessarily know how much fantasy value there's to be had here. Maybe you have more interest than I do. Toronto, a quality defensive team. Denver was playing solid defense. Recently, they've seen a downtick in production, but they're still a top 3 defensive team according to defensive rating on the season. And really, you have underpriced guys like Nikola Jokic. There's no question. You've got Kawhi Leonard in this game at a pretty expensive price point with Kyle Lowry playing. And then you've got guys that are kind of cheap like Serge Ibaka. so on and so forth. I don't know if I'm prioritizing specifically anyone from this game. I'll throw Gary Harris into the mix too. Someone else whose prices continue to decrease. He's dropped $300, or actually he's dropped three, then another 100, then another 300, then another 300 down to 5,100 on DraftKings. What do you make of this game?
Pretty unappealing for me from a fantasy, standpoint. I think that Jokic's price tag is perfectly fine. Like there's no question that there's upside there, but it's just such a deep center position today that I have trouble really prioritizing him over guys, that are cheaper like Cantor or Thompson, John Collins on DraftKings, but even, Karl Anthony Towns at $9,000, which isn't much more expensive than him on DraftKings. It's just tough for me to prioritize someone in a game where I really, really respect Toronto defensively. I don't expect this game to be, very fast paced either. So just, really tough for me to prioritize Jokic. And then behind him, there's not a whole lot. I think that on DraftKings in particular, Gary Harris's $5,100 price tag is somewhat appealing. Paul Millsap played 36 minutes last game, which was good to see. Picked up a couple of minutes at center, actually played a couple minutes, playing a couple minutes alongside Trey Lyles. And this is a spot where you could see a few minutes at center for him, but the price tag, he's 6,300 on DraftKings and 72 on FanDuel. It's not like he's priced down for the 26 to 28 minutes he's been playing most of the season. He's really been overpriced. So him picking up a couple of more minutes potentially doesn't really do anything to move the needle for me.
Yeah, me neither. Let me backpedal for a quick second. We had a question about Rodney Hood. He played a lot of minutes his last time out. He jumped over that 40-minute threshold. Alec Burks, in his two games, played 26 and 24 minutes, a total of 24 shots in those games. Do you have any interest in Rodney Hood with his price down and the minutes up?
I mean, if he shows up in some lineups, I'm fine with it, but I have him projected for 36 minutes and got him in 8% of my initial lineups. I know he played over 40 minutes last game, but I'm not projecting him that high just because if you go back and look, Colin Sexton only played like 26 minutes in that game. You had Jordan Clarkson, therefore, picking up extra minutes at point guard. I think that it's more likely that you get Hill in like the 36-minute range than 41 or 42.
Yeah, I put him there as well. It's difficult for me to see him putting 40 minutes on the board again. Look, Hood's just one of those guys, kind of like you said, where if he pops up at 4,300, you have absolutely no issue with it because sure, he can get hot. He's 5,100 on FanDuel, by the way. But Rodney Hood is so scoring dependent that it's really tough to get consistent production from him. He's so ridiculously dependent on scoring that if Rodney Hood shoots 3 for 12, you're probably getting less than 20 fantasy points, even if he plays 30 minutes. So that's the risk you have to take. And if you're willing to do it, then all right, there it is. If you're enjoying today's show, by the way, and you appreciate our content, hit us with a thumbs up. It helps us out quite a bit, more than you would know. And we appreciate all of you for doing so. Back to Denver and Toronto. Man, I'm like, even Jokic here, you'd say, man, $8,200 Jokic, how do you avoid that? Well, I can give you a lot of reasons by the name of Cantor and Towns and Thompson and Collins why you could avoid Nikola Jokic against Toronto today.
Yeah, exactly. It's just a really deep position. And, it's a very attractive price tag, but at the end of the day, you're just kind of playing probability games with DFS. And there's a lot of centers that are that project as more likely to give you, the scores that you're looking for at their respective price tags. So it just makes it so I am not prioritizing Jokic as much as I like him as a player.
Yep. I can't do so either. Serge Ibaka's cheap. I think it's a decent price. His usage has definitely come down, especially since Siakam's taken a larger role in the offense and clearly been producing with that larger role. Granted, Siakam's production comes from all across the board. I mean, he produces in a multitude of categories, but it's just really tough for me to find a lot of love in this game. There's 1, 2, 3, 4 games. Do you want to move on? Because the next 4 games, I have a feeling we're going to spend quite a bit of time on.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that I would add here is that whoever starts at center for Toronto, I'm expecting it to be Ibaka, but we haven't seen, and I've been wrong on that a lot this season. Whoever starts at center, I think they're underpriced. 5,500 for Ibaka and 4,400 for Jonas is a really, really nice price point. But beyond that, there's just nothing here that I'm really interested in.
All right, let's keep it going then. Yeah, and I will point out just one more time, Gary Harris is really cheap.
Yep.
Like he's kind of falls into the same category as Rodney Hood. If he pops up in some of your lineups, you're not going to have an issue with it because when healthy, he's playing 35, 36 minutes every single game. This game, I would expect to stay competitive. Toronto's a 7-point favorite, but Denver's a decent enough team to hang around. So, look, if Gary Harris gets to shooting well, then you could certainly see a decent performance. And 5,100 isn't that tough of a price tag to pay off, but he's not somebody I'm prioritizing either. Okay. Golden State and Atlanta. Atlanta, 10.5-point dogs at home. This game's got a slate high 236.5-point total. I've always talked about how Atlanta or Golden State allows teams to hang around. I mean, hell, this team this year, what are they, 15-9? They've done a whole lot more than that. Granted, they've been without Curry and Draymond Green for large stretches of the season, but just to kind of point out what I'm talking about here, they are the Golden State Warriors this year by quarter. This is their net rating by quarter. 2.8 in the first quarter, plus 2.8, plus 2.9 in the second quarter, plus 5.3 in the third quarter, and plus 7.5 in the fourth. You see this all too often. Teams keep it competitive for the first half. The third quarter gets a bit dicey, and then they blow their doors off in the fourth quarter. The numbers bear that out. It's the same case last year. They let teams hang around. That's not to say this will be the case tonight, but it is to say that I wouldn't be shocked if Atlanta at least hangs around long enough for a bunch of the starters to get their minutes. And I don't like predicting blowouts anyway, because more times than not, we really don't know. Okay, let's start with the Warriors side because the Atlanta side's a mess, and that's going to take some time to break down. Mentioned to you yesterday, Stephen Curry at his price point, $9,500 on DraftKings and $9,700 on FanDuel is something I just can't ignore.
Yeah, completely agree with you. And we saw him play almost 37 minutes in his first game back. So there's no reason to be concerned about his minutes at all. And as we talked about on the podcast, I think you're the same way, but I don't really like getting too bogged down in individual matchups, defensively. But it's worth pointing out in this particular spot that not only is it, a huge pace-up game and just a really appealing game overall, but with Klay Thompson and with Kevin Durant out there, those are two scorers that Atlanta is going to have to pay attention to with guys like Bazemore and Taurean Prince. So there's an even better chance that you're getting a bunch of Trae Young having to try and slow down Steph Curry, at least for portions of this game. And we know, that that's not something Trae Young is going to be able to do. So on top of everything else, I think it just stands out as, a really good matchup from an individual standpoint for Curry as well. Really, really like him a lot, especially in like mini game stacks on DraftKings. If I'm playing Trae Young on DraftKings where he's really cheap, I love running it back with Steph Curry here for increased upside.
So I don't know. So how much Curry do you have?
In the initial 150 I made, I had 27% Curry.
Okay. Yeah, that seems pretty fair. I'd be okay if I ended up with more than that, honestly. Like, this is a spot where Stephen Curry could drop 30 points in the first half, and I wouldn't be surprised. And when you talk about perfect matchups, it doesn't get any better than this. I mean, the Hawks play at the league's fastest pace. They're allowing the most points per game. They're allowing the second highest 3-point percentage to their opponents. Everything just falls perfectly in the Curry's lap here. Not to mention, if you're going to see like Taurean Prince on Kevin Durant and probably Bazemore in the minutes he plays, I guess some Kevin Huerter on Thompson, is Trae Young going to be guarding Stephen Curry?
Right. I mean, it's just a really appealing spot. Anytime that he's defended by Trae Young, he should just be going nuts. And I guess like to put it in context of guys priced around him on DraftKings, like you have him at 9,500, you have Towns at 9K, you have Drew at 8,300. I have all three of those guys with at least a 24% chance of getting to where I'd like them to get to in tournaments. And that really stands out amongst, everyone else at the top end. So a lot of my exposure split between those three guys. But I, really, really do like Curry.
So do I. I really like him just because I could see this game, even if it blows out, being one where he crushes. Plus, he's under 10K, a guy that earlier in the season was above 10K almost every day because of how well he was producing. Trae Young, in defensive real plus minus, not just plus minus, defensive real plus minus, take it for what you will. You don't have to like that stat, perfectly fine with me. Ranks 442 out of 442 players. That's right. Dead last. And he owns a defensive rating of 116. So that's not good. If this game somehow manages to stay close, I'm putting Curry up over 60. Unless he suffers a catastrophic injury, I don't see how he doesn't post a huge game. So, yep, Stephen Curry, loving that. I will tell you, though, Adam, Kevin Durant's priced up there, and it as time goes on and Curry stays healthy, pretty much assure you that Kevin Durant's price point will come back down to around 10K. And I wouldn't be surprised to see Curry more expensive than him within a couple of weeks. Klay Thompson is someone who, generally speaking, when everyone's healthy, is like a mid 6K price point. You've got him up at $7,400 on DraftKings and 7K on FanDuel, which is pretty enticing. I actually don't mind Klay even at this price just because the matchup is so fitting. What else are you doing outside of Stephen Curry with the Warriors?
Yeah, I mean, Durant's appealing because of his price, or not his price point, because of his position. But I just don't like the price point with Curry back. It's really tough for me to pay up for him. Thompson, I think, is a little more expensive than he will be a week or so from now, too. The front court here is interesting with Damian Jones out. Once he left the game, we had Kevon Looney started the second half. In the fourth quarter, Looney was the center that essentially was matching up with Andre Drummond in that game. We saw him, Jordan Bell, and Jonas Jerebko all get fourth quarter minutes at the 5. Jerebko's came directly against Blake Griffin. So I'm not projecting Jerebko for many center minutes here, just because I expect Atlanta to play big with, Dedmon, Len, and potentially Miles Plumlee all in the rotation. So I think most of the center minutes are split between Looney and Bell. I think that it'll probably be kind of a hot hand situation, but I would give the edge to Looney. I expect that he is at least the first one to get a chance to go out and play well. So I think that Looney comes in, especially on DraftKings where he's power forward eligible, as a pretty reasonable value option.
Yeah, me too. So you have Damian Jones with the torn pec muscle. That's gotta hurt like a bitch, by the way, man. It's gotta hurt. They say you tear it, just kind of flaps around. Like, where does it go? I don't know. If it ever happens to you, let me know, Adam. It sounds brutal. And then you've got no Draymond Green. He's out. We keep hearing out at least 2 or 3 more games, and then out at least 2 or 3 more games. Their front court is now consisting of Kevon Looney. Oh, and Alfonso McKinney's out as well. So you're talking about Kevon Looney. Cousins isn't back yet, obviously. Jonas Jerebko, Jordan Bell, and then the minutes Durant gets at the 4. But they're thin here, man, and these aren't exactly defensive juggernauts, not named Kevin Durant.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I think that you can certainly get value from this front court.
I'm talking too on the other side. Like, you look at John Collins, he's going to be going up against all of those names I just mentioned. And look, 1.03 fantasy point per minute guy for his career. Granted, you've only got 1 season and 5 games or so. Or 1 season and 8 games. So it's not a huge sample. However, he is the type of player that has, the point, rebound, double upside, can give you like a 19 and 11 game as we saw last time out. He is a quality player, got a lot of work to do defensively, but I like John Collins. I like this price. I don't like that he isn't power forward eligible, but at 5,300, you don't need a ceiling game from him here at all. You just need him to stay on the court.
Right. If he were power forward eligible on DraftKings, it would just be like the easiest play in the world. I still think since you can roster 2 centers, he's still showing up in a ton of lineups. FanDuel, the price tag is nowhere near as appealing at 7,100, but he is a power forward, so it makes it easier to get to him there. And I think he still projects as a good play, not as good as DraftKings, obviously, but, still a good play, especially, again, if you're playing guys from Golden State, having Collins in there just increases the upside of your lineup as a whole.
Yes, sir. I haven't played much Collins this year because I've thought that he was a bit overpriced, up around 62, 6,100. And before that, his minutes were very limited. We didn't know what to expect. But now that we're getting 30 plus minutes a game at 5,300, this is really, really inviting. So I do like Collins a lot. Now, the rest of this game is where it gets interesting. You've got Trae Young $6,000 on DraftKings, 72 on FanDuel, but 6,000 on DraftKings. You've got Taurean Prince, who's just been a downright disaster recently, but at $4,800 on DraftKings, it's the cheapest I think he's been all season. And then we talked about John Collins. You still, though, have a couple of these guys where if you're playing Curry or you're playing Durant and you're hoping from or Thompson and you're hoping from a ceiling game there, while you may not love these Atlanta players, there are certainly plenty of cheap options to run it back with in a game that has the highest total on the entire slate.
Yeah, completely agree. And really attacking this Atlanta team, for me, it depends. For one, I think the prices are just more appealing on DraftKings than they are on FanDuel, but it really depends what you're playing. If you're playing cash games, I don't think you need to pay a whole lot of attention to Atlanta here, just because they do have such a volatile rotation where we can't trust these guys. But if you're playing tournaments, I mean, looking at their prices again, especially on DraftKings, Trae Young at $6,000 can really, really easily smash that price tag. If I play Young, I do want to make sure I'm running it back with one of the main Golden State guys, just because if Young has a good game, it's pretty likely that it stays close. But the price tag there is really, really appealing for him. We already talked about John Collins, but then even guys like Alex Len and Dwayne Dedmon, you can't say with any certainty how many minutes either of them are going to play on a nightly basis, but there's a pretty good chance at least one of those guys plays 24 minutes tonight at center. You have Len at 3,600, as basically a point per minute guy. You have Dedmon at 3,800 that, again, projects as about a point per minute guy. So I think that, like, you obviously don't want them in the same lineup, but they are guys who will probably not be very highly owned because of the uncertainty, but they do give you upside at their price points.
Yeah, they all do. Even Prince, as disgusting as it seems, because they're going to need it. Look, this is a run and gun team that lives and dies by the three-pointer, mostly dies by the three-pointer, but they're going to jack up a ton of shots, man. This is an Atlanta squad that plays at the league's fastest pace. That's a big deal in a spot like this. And I see it as one or two of these guys, because of how cheap they are, is going to have to produce something of value. Right. They attempt the fourth most threes in the game, and guys like Prince and Trae are going to jack up a lot of them. So it depends on where you want to go. Personally, I think your best point per dollar guys are Collins and Trae, but I'm not writing Prince off quite yet either. It's gross. I get it. I wouldn't blame anyone for not wanting to go near him, but he's also very cheap. And if he plays 33 minutes again and doesn't get into foul trouble, he's going to give you some opportunity to pay off that price tag with relative ease. Anything else in this game?
No.
All right. Washington, New York. Here's another one. 228.5 total. Wizards are 1.5 point favorites against the Knicks. I mean, that's how far this Washington team is sunken. It's been bad. Last night, we had word that and by the way, Joe Harris is out for Brooklyn, for those of you curious. Last night, we had word that Otto Porter was out. Well, now he's questionable. Jeff Green's probable. Trey Burke is out. We'll start with the New York Knicks backcourt. Trey Burke played 36 minutes last game when Emmanuel Mudiay played 36 minutes last game. Burke came in a minute off the bench, less than a minute, was out. And Alonzo Trier played 17 minutes. I think only 4 of them next to Mudiay. So he soaked up all the backup point guard minutes, and that was pretty much it. Mudiay got a ton of run in that game, but David Fizdale is also their coach. How do you see this game playing out in the backcourt for the Knicks, assuming it stays close? Because I don't want to get into blowout talk. It does nobody any good.
Right. I mean, so I expect that you get at least 30 minutes from Mudiay, potentially more if he's playing really well. But I'm projecting him for 30 minutes. That last game did go to overtime, so you got an extra 5 minutes from him there. So I'm projecting 30 minutes from Mudiay. I expect Trier to get the backup point guard minutes again, unless Frank Ntilikina rejoins the rotation. Keep in mind that he's on this team, and we really have no idea how this rotation is going to go on a nightly basis. But from the information that we have, I expect Trier to get the backup point minutes. I expect him to pick up a few minutes alongside Mudiay. If he's playing well, then probably more. But I think you probably get him coming in somewhere around 22 to 24 minutes. Damian Dotson came in and played 33 minutes, including overtime against Milwaukee. I don't feel comfortable projecting him for 28 to 30 minutes. I have him right around 24 to 26. If he plays well, you probably get a few more, but just not something I really feel confident in there. Moody, I think from the backcourt is pretty clearly the safest option, even though I hate using that word with Moody. But with Burke out, it just should help to solidify his minutes.
It's tough, man. I think the question comes down to this. So Moutier's 5K on FanDuel. On DraftKings, he's also 5K. It's not a crazy price tag if you're getting the run from him. And logically, you would assume that he plays 30 plus minutes. That would make the most sense with Burke out of the lineup. There's no certainty here. So how are you hedging this? What are you doing in terms of ownership right now with Moutier? Because that's really what it all boils down to. We could talk about how many minutes we think he's going to get, but how much of him do you have right now?
Yeah, in that initial crunch, he came in at 17%, which I think I'd be fine with.
How much? I'm sorry. My
17.
dog's barking in my damn. 17%. Okay. Yeah, 17% seems about right. If he was cheaper, I think it would be a lot easier. Like if he was 4,300, I'd have a much easier time just playing a whole lot of Moutier. But 5K is up there a little bit. FanDuel's a little bit easier. Plus, you need to play two of them. Not to say you don't have plenty of point guards on this slate, but I don't mind Moutier. It's a good matchup. This Washington defense has just been so dreadful, which is why guys like Tim Hardaway, 28.5% usage, 35 plus minutes in competitive games, and Enes Kanter facing a Washington team that's dead last in rebounding with Dwight Howard off the court. There's more than just the backcourt here. And if you don't want to play Moutier, if you don't feel comfortable with Moutier, it's not like that means you don't have to, not like anyone loves getting exposure to the Knicks, but it does feel like one of those nights where you should probably be considering it with them facing one of the league's worst defenses.
Yeah, exactly. On a fast-paced Washington team as well. Hardaway, the minutes should be there. He's actually been really the only guy on the Knicks that has been locked into a consistent role minutes-wise this season. Who knows, if his shots go in, but the shot should be there for him. So, and he's small forward eligible on DraftKings, which is nice. So, yeah, I like Hardaway a lot. And then I love the front court here with Noah Vonleh and with Enes Kanter against a Washington team that is up there with Atlanta as one of the worst rebounding teams in the entire NBA, especially without Dwight Howard on the floor. You should get around 36 minutes here from Noah Vonleh, assuming he doesn't find someone to foul, which is, of course, an issue. But we've talked about it a lot, that he just does a lot of things well, and he makes it really easy for Fizdale to keep him on the floor. He's one of their better passers. He can space the floor a little bit. He can do some rebounding. So it's just a pretty appealing spot for him. And for, Enes Kanter, who is one of the best rebounders in the NBA, going against, Thomas Bryant and Markieff Morris at the 5. Just a spot where Kanter should go, nuts. And I'm not concerned that he didn't close that game against Milwaukee, because if you actually look at the minutes that he didn't play in the fourth quarter and overtime, Milwaukee was running Giannis at the 5. So I wouldn't expect Kanter to be on the floor for that. Markieff Morris is obviously not the same thing as Giannis, and Kanter should not have a problem staying out there with Markieff Morris. Yeah,
I love Enes Kanter here. I don't know how I'm not going to play a bunch of Kanter. He's especially cheap on DraftKings. He's one of the best rebounders in the game. And he's one of the best scorers at the center position. Now, is he locked into this to 30 plus minutes? No, but this feels like one of those games where he shouldn't have much trouble getting run out there, Adam. I don't, unless barring a blowout, and you could say that in any game, this game's got a very close spread. I don't see why Kanter wouldn't get 30 minutes here.
Right. Yeah. There's no reason to expect him to not play 30 plus minutes.
What about Noah Vonleh? You talked about him last night. You were pretty high on him. Does that ring true again today?
Yeah. I still like him. Should play 36 minutes as long as he doesn't foul. Yeah, I like Vonleh.
All right. What else do you have for New York? You're not as talkative today, man. Come on, get going here.
I just talked about Vonleh.
In-depth content. You're supposed to tell me when I missed this. I was I was in chat. All right, Washington. Bradley Beal's minutes are insane. This is something you've talked about quite a bit, right? Like more so than John Wall. Brad Beal's playing monster minutes. He's averaging over 40 minutes per game in regulation, not including the Houston game, over his last 6 starts. Not including that game against Philly where he had early foul trouble and they got shit on. But he's getting so many minutes in close games. I know Scott Brooks has talked about, pulling it back a little bit, but he hasn't done it yet, Adam.
Yeah, I mean, competitive games, he's just playing like 42 plus minutes a night. He actually sat 2 minutes in the second half against Brooklyn, which was more than he normally had been. But he still sat like a total of 6 minutes for the entire game. If Porter is out, then it makes it even easier to project Beal to play 40 plus minutes. But yeah, I mean, there's no reason to think that if this game stays competitive, that Beal suddenly stops playing just massive amounts of minutes. And that just makes him a really appealing play, because even if he isn't one of the best on a per minute standpoint, he's still, around the fantasy point per minute guy. And just getting that many minutes out of him makes it so he has a really high floor to go with, a high ceiling if he actually has a big scoring game. So really, really do like Beal here quite a bit.
So do I. I mean, among all of Washington's players, I think you could almost say that he's the most reliable right now over Wall. And I'm factoring salary into that.
Yeah, I agree. He actually showed up in the crunch that I did as my highest owned shooting guard at 28% on DraftKings.
Do you think Satoransky is going to start here?
If Porter's out, well, actually, I guess it doesn't really matter. I'm expecting Satoransky to start, yeah. I think that if Porter's out, you probably get Satoransky and Green. If Porter's in, you probably get Satoransky and Porter.
Yeah. God, I don't have much interest in Satoransky, even if he starts. And here's why. I know people love when guys like this are starting because it makes them seem a lot more appealing. But I think he just gets Kelly Oubre, suffers the same fate. He's played 126 minutes with John Wall and Bradley Beal on the court since the start of last year. And he has a 9% usage rate and 0.54 fantasy points per minute. Look, I get the sample isn't huge, but there's no question that Beal and John Wall soak up the large majority of offensive possessions in this lineup, or in the starting lineup. And Satoransky playing off the ball doesn't really provide much value. So I guess the only benefit here is that he's cheap.
Right. I mean, if he starts, you can project him for more minutes, but he's just a guy who's a better real life basketball player than DFS player, especially when John Wall's not out. When you have Satoransky playing point guard, then he's productive. He's a good passer. He facilitates well. He gets you points when he's handling the ball. But if he's out there alongside Wall and Beal, he essentially is out there for defensive reasons and to stand in the corner on offense and shoot a three if Wall gives him the ball. So it's not a very appealing spot, regardless of if he's starting or not, as long as Wall's healthy.
Gerard Fabiano says Beal is hands down one of the worst plays on this slate.
Okay.
I'm curious, Gerard, tell me why. Tell us why, and I will be fair, but I don't know, a guy playing 40 minutes a night at like 7,900 is, I don't think by far one of the worst plays, but we'll see. Maybe you have something that I don't know. Rest of this Washington team, Adam.
Yeah, so I mean, Keefe obviously depends on the starting lineup, but Keefe, assuming he gets 32 to 34 minutes off the bench at center, it's not a great matchup in that Mitchell Robinson actually is a competent defender when he's able to not foul. But still, Keefe is just productive in this role. The price tags come up to where he's not as easy of a play as he has been in previous games, but I still think he has some upside. If Porter's out, then you should get around 30 to 32 minutes apiece from Jeff Green and from Kelly Oubre. Green, if he starts, he's another one where his usage would go down just because he's obviously out there more minutes with Wall and with Beal. But, playing around 30 minutes at a sub 4K price tag still appealing. Kelly Oubre is cheap enough that I have no issue with him either. It's just kind of, mixing and matching these guys because it's tough to predict which of them has a big game, but if Porter is out, the minutes are there for a bunch of cheap guys too.
If Porter's out and Keefe comes off the bench, that's who I would prefer. On this team, I want the guy that's coming off the bench.
Yeah, but I mean, Keefe also is 5,900 compared to 3,800 for Green and 43 for Oubre.
Sure. No, absolutely. But no, the same thing is for me. If Keefe starts, and Green comes off the bench, I like Green at 3,800.
Yeah, I agree.
like against Philly, he got hurt. He hit his head. He came back. He played 22 minutes and took 2 shots, dude. Like
Right.
these guys disappear in the starting lineup when they're playing next to Wall and Beal.
Yeah, he has a 14.5% usage rate alongside Wall and Beal this season, compared to he's up 18 to 20% when he comes off the bench.
Right. So that's all. It's not that I hate him. It's just I prefer him when they get 50 to 60% of their minutes with it. Well, more than that, with at least one of Beal or Wall off the court, and a good amount of run with both of them off the court. So to me that makes sense. All right, we'll move on to the final 2 games here. The last one is going to be a whole lot of fun. But before we do, I want to let everybody know that as a gift to everyone out there that's been supporting awesemo.com throughout all of this, and we've had a lot of great supporters, a lot of guys that tune into the deeper dive in all of our shows each and every night and support us. We're giving something away every day of December through Christmas Eve. So for the first week, we're going to give away a free NFL membership every single day for the rest of the season. That includes all of the Awesemo's all of Awesemo, Alex Baker's rankings for every slate, including the showdown, ownership projections, and all the premium content on the site. All you got to do is click the like button, and here's what we're going to do. We'll mix it up each day. Since on Friday we had the who has the best nickname for Jaren Jackson, and I think we'll keep it simple. Jaren Jackson is probably the best one. I spent some time on that. I want to know in the comment section, and you have to do this in order to be entered to win, and it's very easy. Who has the worst nickname in professional sports? And I'll give you mine. Hassan Whiteside tried to name himself Agent Block. It is the worst nickname in professional sports, and I'm sure there's other out there. We'd love to hear from you. So all you got to do is hit the like button and comment on the worst nickname in professional sports in the comment section. You'll get an entry for every show that you do this for. So if you pop into the early bird, the deeper dive, live before lock, process show, all of them, you'll be entered every time for each of them. And the winners will be randomly chosen. And on Christmas Eve, we're going to give away an free all access annual membership to one of the entries throughout the month. So all you got to do is start now, like the video, comment on the worst nickname in professional sports for your chance to win in the 24 days of giveaways. It's our present from us to you at awesemo.com. Adam, who's the worst nickname in professional sports?
I don't have it on top of my head, but I think that Agent Block's got to be up there. I agree with you on that.
It's got to be up there. Absolutely got to be up there. All right, let's keep it moving here. 2 games to go. Minnesota and Houston. This is another one. Close spread. Houston's still favored by 2 points despite imploding for most of the season, but they do have Chris Paul back. 222.5 total. What team you want to start with here?
Minnesota.
All right. Well, go ahead, sir.
I mean, Karl Anthony Towns, I think, is just the most appealing guy from this game for me. Obviously, he's really sucked lately, but you can't really let that, impact your decision-making going forward, especially because other people do. And so any potential edge that you think you're getting from saying, Karl Anthony Towns is playing bad is probably offset by the fact that his ownership just naturally will come in lower than it would were he coming off, 3 or 4 big games in a row. But since the Jimmy Butler trade, a 27% usage rate, 20% rebounding percentage for Towns, still playing 38 minutes a night in competitive games. And his price tag is, very reasonable. So I think that going right back to Towns here is kind of just something that we have to do and hope that he plays well, especially looking at some of these ugly games. He's had some disappointing performances where he did play full minutes, like the last game against Boston, like the game against Cleveland, but also, 28 minutes against San Antonio in a blowout, 28 minutes apiece against Brooklyn and Denver in games where he was in foul trouble. So it's not like he's just consistently going out there playing 38 minutes and playing poorly. Also has had some just difficult matchups, having to deal with, with an overall good Boston defense, having to deal with Tristan Thompson, Marc Gasol. So I just am not putting a whole lot of stock in the fact that he hasn't been playing poorly. I would rather, just keep rostering him and get the big game when it comes. So I like Towns quite a bit, easily my favorite play from this game.
Me too. Again, the common theme here with a lot of these players is they're too cheap. We've talked about it kind of all show. Like a lot of guys are just too cheap. And I think Towns is another one where you're getting a very good price point on him.
Yeah. And he's never had issues with Capella in the past either. Obviously looking at individual history against people is not the most useful thing. But with centers, I'm willing to do it a little bit more, especially when you have guys that have played against each other for, a few years now. Houston used to be one of the fastest paced teams in the league. So you do want to keep that in mind if you're looking at, what Towns has done on a permanent basis. But he's still just been very successful in this matchup, which is, just a good thing to see, and certainly doesn't make me feel any worse about rostering him.
Yeah, I agree. I'm also not worried about some of the underwhelming games because since Butler left, he still has a 28.3% usage rate, which is perfectly fine by me, right? 34 minutes per game, 21% rebounding rate. The numbers are there. Like all of the numbers are there. So I'm not too concerned about that. I got to tell you though, Towns is really the only player from this game that I have a ton of interest in. I saw someone in chat say, why are people sleeping on Capella? It's not that I'm sleeping on Capella, and I'll let you chime in on this, and then we'll move to the next game. It's more so that, once again, coming back to certain players are just too cheap. And I'd rather have Towns at a $400 markup. And then I'd rather have guys like Cantor and Thompson and a lot of cheaper centers. So really, it's strictly a pricing thing for me. I actually like the matchup for Capella. I just don't think I'm getting there because of his salary today.
Right, and that's where I'm at as well. It has nothing to do really with with Capella. I think it's a fine matchup. I love Capella as a player, but you have Capella who's priced for the production that he's been giving us for the last month or really the entire season now. His price tag is going up while you have the price on guys like Towns coming down. You have Cantor, Thompson for cheap, like you said. On DraftKings, you have John Collins inexplicably at $5,300. Even Jokic at $8,200. We already talked about having trouble getting to him, but in terms of raw upside, he's right there with Capella in terms of what he can do. And he's even a little bit less expensive. So it comes down to projections and probabilities. And I think if you play this slate 100 times, Towns beats Capella by enough to where they really shouldn't be the same price tag or similar.
That's where I'm at. Yep, that's where I'm at as well. All right, let's close it out unless you have anything else on this one you want to talk about.
Nope.
All right. Pelicans, Clippers, last one here. And we saved the best one for last. Well, actually, the NBA scheduling did this. 8 o'clock game. There no 10 p.m. games here. 8 o'clock game. Pelicans, 2.5-point favorites at home inside the Smoothie King Center. 236 total. Let's get it popping, starting with Anthony Davis. I don't know how you can't love him in this spot.
I have Anthony Davis projected to be the highest scorer on this slate. Looking at my DraftKings projections by almost 10 points.
So do I.
Over James Harden.
9.2 points for me.
Yeah. So I like Anthony Davis a lot. The pace of this game is really appealing on a slate where we've had several games, where it's two slower teams. Not the case here. It's a nice matchup. I've loved taking athletic, offensive-minded centers against this Clippers team because, who is slowing down Anthony Davis? It's not Gortat, it's not Boban, it's not Montrezl Harrell. It's just a spot where the only concerns that I have are that, Anthony Davis is Anthony Davis, and there's a lot of things that can cause him to go to the locker room. But excluding that, there's just nothing for me not to like here. Playing 38 to 40 minutes a night in competitive games. Usage has been up a little bit lately as well, tending to hover more around that 30 to 31% mark than the 27 or 28% that he's at for the season. So I just think that he grades out as the best play out of these expensive guys, and it's not really that close for me.
Me too. So I won't even talk about it, except the fact that he ranks top 10 in like every single fantasy relevant category. That's all you need to know. We don't have a lot of time, so I'll let you run with the rest of this. Drew Holiday, Tim Frazier, go.
I like Holiday a ton. Even though he's playing off ball more with Tim Frazier starting, he's still very, very productive. His assist percentage comes down, but he is still getting some time with the ball in his hands when Frazier's not on the floor. And he's still a high usage guy in, a fast paced game that should play around 38 minutes. So I think Holiday is another really good play, especially on DraftKings where he's only 8,300, 9,200 on FanDuel is a bit tougher of a sell. Tim Frazier is fine. The price tags come up though. So it's not someone that, I'm prioritizing, but if I get him in lineups, I get him in lineups. I do think Etuan Moore is worth pointing out. He's probable for this game, and his price tag is just kind of free falling. He's down to 4,100 on DraftKings, 4,600 on FanDuel, and he's not a consistent scorer, but he does have upside as someone that should play 32 to 34 minutes in a game with a lot of fantasy stats to go around.
I'm with you. Davis for me. And then with Frazier's averaging 17.5 potential assists over those 3 games that he started. That's crazy. He's taken some away from Holiday, but Holiday's usage has actually gone up 1.5%. So I don't have any issue with Holiday either, but Davis is my guy here. And on the other side, Gallinari I think is fine. Aside from that, though, I don't want to pay for Tobias. I don't think I'm paying up for Harrell here. Is there anything on the Clippers side that you like? We can close it out with this.
For the most part, I think that on both sites, they're just very correctly priced. It's not that I dislike the spot for Harris or Gallinari or anyone. It's just that the price tags are pretty much correct, whereas there's been so many guys that we think are underpriced. The exception to that is Lou Williams in tournaments, especially on DraftKings. Only $4,900. Should probably play around 26 minutes, especially if he's playing well and the game's competitive. This is a guy that we know is going to go out there, and his job when he's on the floor is just to chuck shots and to be an offensive force down the stretch. It's a fast-paced Pelicans team that struggles defensively. I think that Lou Williams is just too cheap on DraftKings.
Fair enough. All right, that'll do it for us. Thanks as always for hanging out. We will be back with you tomorrow. Of course, 5-game slate. Stick around. Live Before Lock coming up next. We'll see you, Adam, myself, back here tomorrow on the Deeper Dive. Good luck tonight, everyone.